Hello, everybody. Welcome to APL Readers Corner. Thank you for joining us today. I'm here with Jordan today from the NLK Library, and my name is Tessie, the librarian at the Hoffman Library. So if this is your first time joining us for APL Readers Corner, what we do is that we pick a genre, and then we pick a book from that genre, and we kind of review it within like the genre categories. Like if we pick fantasy, we're like, oh, is this like usual fantasy book? Is it unusual? And so today, the book that we picked, like the genre we had picked originally was poetry, but we ended up finding a zine. Did I say that right, Jordan?
Zine, but close enough.
It's like once I said it wrong one time is when it just completely collapses. But a zine, which we'll talk about a little bit more later, which does have some poetry in it. And the book that we ended up picking was Lady Churchill's Rosebud Wristlet, number 33. So that's pretty exciting. So all of the books that we pick are available on our digital services through the library. So if you have a library card, you can go ahead and go, for this one in particular, it's available on Hoopla. So you can go to Hoopla and check it out right away if you're interested. After you hear us talking about it, I highly recommend checking it out. And because it is a zine, it's available, like there are multiple different issues that you can check out. So if you like this one, you can read another one and see if you like the different themes. For this particular zine that we picked, it has sort of like a nature environmental theme to it, which is pretty exciting. But yeah, so we ended up, so we did, like I mentioned, we did pick a zine that we had originally aimed for poetry, but we ended up with a zine that has poetry in it. So that kind of changed our choice a little bit. But Jordan, if you want to talk about a little bit, what exactly is a zine?
Awesome. So a zine is like short for magazine, and they started off with fanzines back in like I'd say the 1930s science fiction role-playing sci-fi community. And then they had a resurgence in the 1990s with like the punk riot girl scene. And they're often like on a specific subject, theme. Sometimes they can be political in nature. Sometimes they can be about pop culture or music. And they're digital or physical, but they often have small circulating audiences because they're self-published and self-made. Like you can make one on your printer at home. I know I do. I love zines.
I did not know that.
Yeah, I made a zine for Jessica's birthday, our security clerk here today. But yeah, it's all about DIY or do-it-yourself philosophy, which is really fun because it gives back to like taking back like publishing rights to the creator instead of having to lobby for the right to get published.
Mm-hmm.
And they're just really fun. They can be art zines, or they can even be like, trying to think how to say this, like they're about marginalized communities a lot. So it takes like power back, like I said, from the publisher to the community that wants to get the work out there.
Oh, like whenever I used to think about zines, for some reason I would always think about like those penny books that people would just like buy in the marketplace when they like those small published books. I don't know if that fits in that category, but I feel like at least modern day zines are a lot more established. And when we were like gathering our notes about zines, I thought it was really interesting the fact that because they feature like subcultures and like maybe marginalized voices that don't necessarily get heard in the larger publishing world, I thought it was really interesting that academia is now using that to track like different zines to track how these communities are talking about themselves and viewing the world. So I was like, that's pretty awesome. And like for me, it's always interesting to find books or published materials that is not mainstream. So it's like
Right.
a small group of people are reading this, and all their thoughts and their voices are in here. And even if you went to a library, you wouldn't necessarily be able to get those.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're pretty fortunate that we just stumbled across the fact that we have some of these zines in our Hoopla collection. So I was like, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and we actually have a zine library in Denver.
Oh, yes, I have heard about that.
Yeah, so you check that out too.
Yes.
So if you like our Hoopla collection, you can go find more.
There we go. So zines are more popular than I thought. And apparently Denver has a very thriving zine collection, or community, not so much collection. Um, but for this particular one that we ended up choosing, so Lady Churchill's Rosebud Wristlet number 33. So that's just to say that's the issue 33. Usually, so this particular zine is actually a little bit more well known than most. Um, it's published twice a year by Small Beer Press. Small Beer Press. So that's a small publishing company, and I guess it's owned by a wife and husband. And so they work together, they find books, and they publish some of them. Some of them are actually very popular, but they also spend part of their time putting like their love and commitment into zines because they feel like it's very important. So one of the goals of this particular zine is to find fiction that falls between the cracks. So where there's some fiction that wouldn't be published anywhere else, they want to take that fiction and put it in their zine. So they like genre-defying works. They like poetry. They like fiction. One thing I thought that was really interesting is that for their like little summary about what the zine is about, they're like an occasional outburst, an arrow shot into the dark, a harbinger. And so I was like, that's a pretty interesting description of your zine.
Very fluid.
I know, but you could tell that they're definitely publishers. They definitely love the written word when they have summaries like that. Their circulation is less than 1,000, so that's probably physical circulation. I wouldn't be sure about digital, but it is a pretty small zine, even though it's more well known than others. I think probably because their particular publishing house has published some really interesting things that have become popular. So they did publish A Stranger in, I'm going to say this title wrong, Olandria, and that's by Sophia Samatar. And that's been on my book list for like ever, and I haven't gotten the chance to read it. And when I figured out that this was the publishing house that published this book, I was like, instant respect. They've also published another series that I read, the Elemental Logic series, so that one I really enjoyed. So also instant respect when I found that out. For this particular issue, they didn't actually edit it, so that was a little bit different than usual. They had a guest editor, so they had Michael J. DeLuca guest edit this particular zine issue, and for him, he is the editor of another kind of journal of creative writing on environmental justice called The Reckoning. And so you could see in his work that the environment, environmental justice, nature is a very strong theme. And so he brought that with him to this particular edition. So this edition, everything is about sort of humanity's relationship with the earth, which we'll talk a little bit about later. So he said that he wanted to bring the theme of humanity's relationship with the earth with a little touch of humor, a touch of horror, and 17 different kinds of understanding. So there's 17 kind of pieces in this particular zine. And I think the humor and the horror are definitely in there. So
the loudest.
Yeah. So that's basically what this zine is about.
All right, and then so we looked for reviews on social media, Amazon, Goodreads, Hoopla. We only found on Goodreads, which it got a 3.64 rating. And then I wanted to talk about why there's such small reviews. It's self-published and or published through like zine style. And so that means they have small circulating audiences. Like you would only like print like maybe 1,000 zines and then distribute them at like small comic book stores or music stores, record stores. And it's a very niche subculture, the zine world, and it's very underground, but this one is pretty popular because it's on Hoopla, so you don't usually see that. But overall, I loved the book. I think Tessie loved the zine. And I'm really excited to get into this book review. Like, I think this is going to be great.
Yeah, if I had to rate it, I would probably give it like 4.55 out of 5. So that's my rating of this particular anthology.
5 for sure.
I was just thinking about saying something and I totally forgot, so I'll just move on and hope it comes back to me.
Okay.
But so we have a couple of questions prepared. So if you guys want to answer along with us in the comments, let us know if you actually read the zine once you found out this was what we were going to be reading. Let us know if you have any thoughts about it as well. But so for our first question, so a zine is an anthology. So it's made up of several different authors putting their works together around a common theme inside the zine. And for Ladies Churchill's Rosebud Wristlet, because it is from a publishing house that's a little bit well known, it has a mixture of kind of established authors. And so in this particular zine, we have Sophia Samatar. So she was the one that I mentioned wrote The Stranger in Olandria. Yeah, I'm going to say that wrong. But she's a very well-established author. And there's Carmen Maria Machado, who's written a lot of short stories, and she's been in a lot of anthologies before. So they have this mixture of well-known authors and then people that submitted their work and got chosen to be put into the zine just because the editor liked it and felt like it fit the theme. So you have this mix of well-known and little well-known. Which pieces did you enjoy the best, and did you see kind of a difference between what came from the established authors and what came from the little-known authors?
So I loved I Bury Myself the most. There was just one quote that comes to me that I think sums up this whole anthology, actually. The more it lives, the more it is lost when death finally comes. And I think that's kind of reflective of nature and humanity's role together, because you can live life and, you know, see all the beauty and everything, but death is like that eternal thing we all face, including nature. And then I loved Another Afternoon in the Garden. So I think those were both really good. I really felt like everyone was treated equally in this anthology. Like the up and coming writers saw a lot of light, and the established authors saw a lot of good light as well. I think everyone was pretty equal, which is, I think, what a zine is about, is that we should give everyone a chance to shine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I totally get that. And now that I'm thinking about it, it's like I can't distinguish between the pieces that were from really like published authors that have been published already and the ones that are less well known. I enjoy pieces that were from people who were more established, and then I also enjoy pieces from people who like I've never heard of before.
Right.
Hopefully we'll hear from them again. For my favorite ones, I want to say that I really enjoyed Starling Road, and that one was by Alina McNamara. And I think one reason I really enjoyed that one was because it was like it had a hint of fantasy that I really enjoyed.
Yes, I really love the fantasy element in that one. That was really nice.
And then the other one that I really enjoyed, so I did like a request for an extension on the clarity. So that one was by Sophia Samatar. When I first started reading it, like I noticed she was the one that read it, and I had really high expectations. And I was like,
Right.
this is amazing. And when I started reading it, I was confused. I'm like, what? But then by the time I finished it, it was one of those pieces that just kind of stuck in my brain.
Mm-hmm.
It was stuck in my brain. And that particular piece, not to reveal any spoilers, was about a really intelligent, I want to say astronaut, aerospace engineer. She was something who.
I was just saying something up there.
Yeah, something up there. Something that is too smart for me. But who got a job to work on, I want to say that she was maintaining like a satellite or some sort of futuristic thing that was just or going around the Earth. And so in this piece, she's requesting an extension to stay there. Like usually people only stay there for like a year or 2 years at most before they move on to the next step of their career. But for her, she really enjoys the solitude. But I really enjoyed the kind of the little glimpses of how, even though she's saying that she loves to be there, that she was kind of slowly going insane, and that I think part of it was, so the author just really skillfully weaved in the fact that even though she kept saying, "Oh yeah, I really love this solitude," and like it seemed like she did, but at the same time, um, she was running away from her problems.
Right.
So I was like, that was really good. Like by the time I finished, so that was another one I really enjoyed. Cook Like a Hobo was funny. I never knew. Oh, I never knew that. While like campfires were just so hard to control.
Yeah, sure, but I guess that makes sense because that's how so many forest fires start here in Colorado. So,
Yeah. Now I know, and now I know I will not attempt it.
yes.
And then I think the last piece I really enjoyed too. So the March Wind. Is that the March Wind? Yeah, I really enjoyed that one too, just because it was dealing with these two women and their relationship and how one of them thought that they were trying, like it was basically a story about the relationship, but with a setting of these, the author called it occlusions. So it's like part of, oh, I'm trying to think of some sort of like sci-fi parallel where like part of the earth just kind of like time warps. So it's
Yeah.
not necessarily in the same time plane as the rest of everything else. And
Hmm.
so I feel like the pieces that were in here, like a lot of the pieces, if not all of them, you could take those pieces and turn them into like books, or you could turn them into novellas. Like you could keep
Yeah.
going into that world, and that's what made the pieces so amazing.
Yeah. You could really take these pieces and run with them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what makes them so great is because it leaves you yearning for more.
Yes, exactly. So you read this and you're like, oh, I want to hear from all these authors again. Like
Yeah.
stuff. Um, but yeah, so what the theme of this Zine edition is, like I mentioned before, is humanity's relationship with Earth. What piece do you feel embodied this kind of theme the best? And which ones really got you to consider, like, what is our relationship with the Earth? Which made you, like, sit down and, like, really think about it? Like, do you feel any different about humanity's, like, relationship with the Earth and how we go about doing stuff with the environment after reading this?
Yeah, I definitely feel different. Like, it makes me almost want to get like into rewilding and like can start gardening and everything and just really get out there, which is not usually my thing. Um, but yeah, I go back to this one because it spoke to me the most, but I bury myself. Like how she talks about the maggots eating her body and how she hopes she becomes a tree, and like it just brings that circle of life together that we try to hide with urbanism. And really like, I'm trying to think how to phrase this. There's this whole movement to take back death and environmentalism. And I
Mm-hmm.
really found that this whole anthology reminded me of that movement. Just that kind of like get back to the nitty gritty and the dirty and the things we don't want to think about, but are part of the nature of life.
Mm-hmm.
And I just really enjoyed this whole anthology, but I Bury Myself was so great. There's a piece I really wanted to bring up. It's a quote from that one. Then drive to a meadow where there's so much life. There dig a hole long enough and wide enough for your body to fit. Next, climb in and then wait. And I really took that to mean more of like a slow down and enjoy the earth
Mm-hmm.
kind of vibe.
Yeah. No, I can get that. Um, for me, like weirdly enough, like I feel one of the pieces that had the most urban element to it.
Mm-hmm.
So it was, let's see, it was Winter in the Feral City. So that
Yeah.
one had the most nature in it for me. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know why, but that's just what in my head it was just connecting that way. Um, and that piece by Christopher Brown has him kind of like his language in that piece was beautiful. Like I loved reading that particular piece. But he's talking about how he found a dead deer in kind of like this urban wilderness that just kind of got taken back over. by the wilderness in the city, just because it had been left there. Nobody was developing it, and it just got taken back over, which I thought was kind of interesting to read, that even despite the fact that we build these great cities and like we're like developing all this land, that if we just leave it there and we don't touch it for a little while, it just comes all the way right back.
Right. Powerful force.
Yeah. And so I think that's what struck me the most about like humanity's relationship with the earth. I will say that one reviewer, so one Goodreads reviewer, so one of the few reviews we found about this zine edition, thought that the environmental tones were heavy-handed and that it was too focused on humanity rather than the earth. So what do you think about that?
I think it was, I really think that it was equal. I thought that you can't view nature without looking at it through the lens of humanity, just because that's how it is. We don't live in a society that really values nature of its own accord. So I think it played that really well. Yeah, I think it handled it the right way.
Yeah, I don't think it was heavy-handed either. I feel like if you're reading this particular edition and you're not, I don't want to say pro-environment, pro-earth sort of thing, like if you've never kind of like sat down and been like, oh, I really value the environment and what it gives me, and I'm sad that we're destroying it, like if you never have those thoughts, then like you're going to go into this and be like, oh, like why are they talking about environment and the nature and all of this? So I would get that from that perspective. Maybe you would read this and be like, there's too much like nature pandering or something in here. Although, and like you said, that we can't help but view the earth and the environment through the lens of humanity, because we're humans. Like that's how we see the world. And so of course we're going to interpret it through our own eyes. It makes me think of the opening poem for this zine, which I thought was really great. I think it was called "The Sanctity of Nature" by Leslie Whitman, and I thought it was very ironic in the way that she's talking about, oh, look at all this nature stuff, and then she kind of looks at it and is like, whatever, and then kind of goes away and is like, I need a coffee, which I kind of related to that, because even though I love nature and the environment, it's like sometimes when you're like out watching it and you're like, well, I have other things to take care of, and you just go about your day. So it's like you just can't help but viewing nature and the earth and the environment through your own lens. So the way it is, even though sometimes you can try and think of it outside your own point of view. But so yeah, for our next question, do you feel like the anthology has feminist undercurrents? Do you think that is because the nature of the theme, which is not a pun. I did not mean to write that as a pun. But so DeLuca said that he didn't intentionally seek out female voices for his edition, but it was just that the amount of submissions he got from women for this particular zine was just from women. He just got an overwhelming amount of submissions from women, and so he just picked the best, and they just happened to be from women. But do you think because the nature of the theme, is that why? Do we want to? I feel like that's a little bit simplifying it, but what do you think? Feminist undertones, at least.
Yes. Okay. So I have so many thoughts on this because this is like my jam. I do think this has feminist undertones because I find that nature and like the feminine mystique or that feminine vibe go hand in hand together. Because in my mind at least, I always equate urbanism with like men and like patriarchy and capitalism and things. And then when I think of like nature, I think of more of a feminine, motherly, maternal vibe. And I also feel like marginalized voices often try to view things through a more a more nature-focused lens, because like it's the one thing you can't take away from them. And, like there was this one part, Another Afternoon in the Garden, which was about Genesis from the Bible and Adam and Eve. about how she's doing all the work and he's just naming things, and how it's really the patriarchal nature of life is that women are doing more day-to-day things and men are doing more well, ideally they wouldn't be, but more overarching things. Like, you got to think about families, like a mom is doing the diapers, things like that, the day-to-day things to make the family run, whereas the guy might just be doing like the budget, or I don't know, like, you know, there's more highbrow things, which I don't agree with at all. I don't, but I can see that, like, what's the word I'm looking for? Duality in that.
Yeah. No,
I
I remember the piece. No, like, now that you mention it, that piece was definitely like, the whole thing was just about feminism. It's like, it was a reflection of what the patriarchy looks like, where the
Mhm.
Adam got to decide how things are structured, how things were named. He got to give name to these things while Eve was doing like all the work to keep the garden growing.
Yeah.
And I thought it was funny, and I feel like it's definitely a feminist theme where it's like, he was saying, oh, I'm deciding all these things, like you said, like the overarching like way that the world works, and
Mhm.
that takes so much effort, like takes so much out of me. I'm so tired, like, take care of me after this. And but she's been working, and he never acknowledges the work that she does. So
Yeah.
I do remember that piece, and that is definitely feminist.
Mhm.
And I want to say the fact that there are so many female voices in this zine does not make it feminist, but I feel like it's very nice that there are so many female voices in here. And I
Mhm.
really like the point that you made, that maybe this connection to nature, especially for communities and for groups that maybe feel a little bit more like are more marginalized, like that connection to nature is something that you would keep returning to because that can't be taken away, which was
Yeah.
very nice, very interesting thought that I've never thought before, and I really like it. Let's see. Yeah, there was a quote from DeLuca, but I'm just going to leave that one because we kind of covered it a little bit. For our last question, this one's pretty simple, but we had originally gone into this reader's corner thinking that we were going to be talking about poetry. We ended up picking a zine, and now we're talking about short fiction, but there was some poetry in the zine. Like, was there any poetry in here that you particularly liked?
Yeah, let me find it real quick. I had to write down the titles because I'm so forgetful. It was, for me, Seek the Sun. It was
Mm-hmm.
really modern poetry along the lines of, I guess, like Rupi and things like that. Um, I just really loved how she ended it with Tyranny Forever Babe, with like the forever,
Yeah.
uh, like that modern touch to the poetry that was in this book. And then some of it was more elegant prose, and
Mm-hmm.
I love the mix match of all of it. It was
Mm-hmm.
so great.
No, I did enjoy the fact that you have some short fiction and then some poetry. I think I already mentioned the poem that I liked the best, which was the very first one, the introduction to this zine,
Mm-hmm.
where she looks out into nature and is kind of observing it, and then she's like, "Well, I got things to do. I'm gonna
Yeah.
go get a coffee." Which I don't know if that is sort of an acknowledgement of how we view nature right now, or if it's kind of like what would you like? What's the word for it? But it's like a chastisement against how we view nature right now. I'm sure, like with poetry, you can, just depending on how you're viewing it, like the meaning changes just depending on how you're viewing it. So that's the great part about poetry, is that whoever's reading it interprets it in their own manner, and it means something to them. In this case, I took that poem and I was like, yeah, I also need the coffee. Thank you.
You always need coffee.
Yeah, always need coffee. And water. I have water, so I'm
Oh,
I'm being healthy. I'm being healthy. Today, I did have coffee this morning though. But yeah, so that's all for this particular zine, except for one lasting question, which I could not find on the internet, which is why is this series called Lady Churchill's Rosebud Wristlet? I want to know. It's such an interesting title. I couldn't find it anywhere on the internet, which was kind of sad. But if any of you guys read zines and know why this particular zine is called what it is, please let me know, because it's been a question that has been bothering me. Not so much bothering, but I'm very curious. I'm very curious.
yeah, in vibes from the title, like, and I want to know why.
Mhm. Yeah. But thank you guys all for joining us. I hope you check out the zine. If not this particular issue, then maybe some of the other ones, because not all of them. If you don't like nature, maybe you don't want to read this one, but if you do, I highly recommend it. Jordan highly recommends it. So check it out. You can check it out on Hoopla, and Hoopla also has several other issues of this particular zine, so you could read all of them. Um, and then I think this particular zine also created a book. I don't know if we have the book, which is the best of. So it's like a decade worth of their best work from this particular zine in one book, which I hear is pretty good. So
Mhm.
I would check that out. As for we're also doing other virtual programs here at the Aurora Public Library, so check that out. We're doing virtual story times. We have virtual Zoom sessions that you can take a look at and join. For us here at the Readers Corner, that now that the library branches are back open, we're changing our schedule up a little bit. So for this month, we're doing only 2 Readers Corners, and then we're only doing 2 mystery reads. And then starting in September, we're only going to be doing 1 Reader's Corner a month. So hopefully that now that things are getting a little bit busier, that you'll have time to read the book along with us. We're always going to start early, and we're going to put the discussion questions on Facebook. So if you want to read and then answer the discussion questions on Facebook, like, we'd really love the feedback. Let us know what you think about the books we're reading. And we're introducing some new programs, so check those out as well. Otherwise, I hope you guys all have a great day, and join us for our next Reader's Corner.
Bye, guys.